This is something you guys have been requesting the hell out of for a long time. It took a lot of time, but I finally found 3 stories that take place during school lockdowns. It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door, and that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up." 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now he's being given the proper help that he needs. My school has 2 lunch periods. First lunch period is for all 6th graders and some 7th graders. The second lunch period is for the other half of the 7th graders and all 8th graders. The lockdown happened in the beginning of October. The day the lockdown occurred, it was overcast and rainy. During the first lunch period, I heard 4 loud booms. I personally thought it was thunder, but the entire lunch crowd started screaming. I was thinking those kids were just serious pussies, but the campus security came in and started yelling at people to go into the multi-purpose room, and the kids who were in line buying lunch had to throw out their lunch and come inside. Me and some friends went inside the room along with a huge group of other kids. Everyone was curious as to what was happening. Our multi-purpose room is huge, and the back wall of the room is made of see-through glass. When me and my friends were rushed inside the campus, security was covering the glass with the curtains, and there were adults at every exit. My friend Eric was curious, as well as the rest of us, so he asked one of the adults what was going on. When he came back, he said, "You know how right in front of TMS there's those houses?" I replied, "Yeah." "There's this mentally disabled, crazy man that barricaded himself in front of his house, and he's threatening to commit suicide and kill the cops if he's evicted. He was walking around outside of school watching kids in a weird way," Eric told us. It turned out the man was also a registered sex offender, making matters worse. We were stuck in the multi-purpose room for a whole hour, taking up 2 periods. After the whole thing was settled, we were escorted to our classrooms one by one. I later found out that the man lives next to my friend Brandy, who told me about the previous Halloween when she saw the same man at his window cutting his arm and writing in his own blood, "Don't come here or I'll kill you," on his window. Of course, being Halloween, people, including Brandy, assumed it was just for the holiday. But after this horrific incident, we knew this man was mental, and we're glad he never got near us. I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at my old high school as a sort of computer intern in the school basement. The basement of the school is very messy and disorganized, but there is a small 3-person office that's actually very nice down there. It has 3 nice big desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat screen TV mounted on the wall, and oh so satisfying air conditioning, a luxury the students and teachers cannot enjoy in the school. And of course all the school servers and other computery stuff. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers flat out adored me. I could actually consider them as real friends, not just teacher figures, so they all helped tremendously in landing me this job. It's been great, until something that happened a few weeks ago. My 2 co-workers that share the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time. They were upstairs working on papers or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women in the front office telling me the school was on lockdown and that somebody, possibly armed, had entered the school. There wasn't much that I could do other than turn off the lights because, surprisingly, as nice as this little office was, it didn't have an actual door to it, just a big opening, and the door to the whole basement didn't even have a working lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and my computer screen. I kept my phone on the desk, texting both Gary and Dave, but they wouldn't respond. I sat down there in the dark, playing games on my phone for like 20 minutes, waiting for the call from up front to tell me to resume working. I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't hear what was going on upstairs from down here, but I was not allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over. Then the noisy basement door opened. As the creaking echoed across the basement and into my office, I sat up from my seat, wondering if I should call out Gary or Dave. I was eager to get some info from them. Someone then came running down the stairs, and their footsteps were approaching my office. I pushed away my chair and crawled under my desk. Somebody entered the office but did not turn on the lights. There was just silence. I can't even describe the fear I was experiencing. I felt like if I made one sudden noise, I'd be a dead man. Suddenly, my phone dinged as I got a text message. I felt my entire world shrivel up and die at that one moment as I clenched my teeth in fear. Footsteps suddenly moved closer to me until I finally dove out from under the desk in capitulation, begging whoever it was not to kill me. And just then, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up. It was some guy in a red plaid button-up, jeans, and a reddish-black cap. He told me, "It's okay, I'm just down here hiding with you." "What's going on up there?" I whispered to him. He kind of ignored my question and asked me if there's an exit down here. I told him, "Yeah, around that way." Before he could do anything else, I asked him, "Who are you?" There was a brief moment of silence before he started explaining he was coming in to pick up his son when a teacher told him to hide. After his explanation, I checked my phone and saw the text I received was from Dave. It said, "Dude, this is fucking crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and a hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." I was about to reread that text out loud to the man, until I realized. I looked up, and felt my stomach sink. The man seemed to catch on to my suspicious stare. Panicking, all I could think to do was to run for the upstairs. A gunshot echoed through the basement, and I could hear the bullet ricochet off something metal in the darkness. But thank God the bullet missed me, and I made it upstairs. Fortunately, police were waiting at all exits, including the basement exit, and caught the man the second he opened the door. More good news, our teacher Mr. Buckley survived the gunshot. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Buckley had some beef for whatever reason, but that was never revealed. All we know is that Mr. Buckley couldn't have done anything that would have warranted this kind of reaction. And I know that the sound of that gunshot will forever echo in my mind. I was a new student to Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. Going into my junior year of high school, not knowing anyone was really rough. Everyone obviously had their friend group sorted out by then. The worst part was lunchtime though. My school wouldn't let juniors leave for lunch, only seniors, so I had to eat in the cafeteria. I was dreading it because I knew I'd have no one to sit with, and I didn't want to force myself into a random table. When lunchtime finally came, however, I walked into the cafeteria with my tray of food looking for a place to sit. Every single table was taken. I didn't even have the option of sitting alone. But there was one table in the corner of the cafeteria with only 2 kids sitting at it. That was the least intimidating spot to sit, so I walked over and asked if I could sit there. They both looked at each other, and one of them said yeah. I noticed upon sitting down that the 2 were identical twins. They looked like they were partially of Hispanic heritage, but they didn't have accents. They honestly seemed alright. They introduced themselves as Antonio and Bruno, and they had a conversation with me. They invited me to hang out with them after school, and honestly I figured why not? I had to start off somewhere as far as making friends. I got their numbers, and after school I went home to drop off all my stuff. Shortly after, I got a text from Bruno, telling me he and his brother were planning on hanging out. He told me to meet them around 9 that night at the nearby cemetery that was like a 10-minute walk from my house. He said there was a cool hangout spot near there. Plus, the first day of school was on a Friday, so he had off the next day. I had nothing to do, so I said, yeah, I'm down. When the time came, Bruno texted me one more time asking if I was still coming. I said, yeah, I'm gonna leave in a few, and confirmed we were meeting on the road by the cemetery. He said yeah, so I began my walk in the dark to the cemetery. The longer I walked, the more I thought about my whole move and being the new kid in high school, and thinking about the fact that I was literally walking to a cemetery at night to hang out with 2 kids I just met. But anyway, I got to the little road next to the cemetery and asked Bruno where they were. He started typing right away, and he said they were in the woods hanging by a small lake that they wanted to show me. Then he promptly sent his location. So I made my way into the woods, pushing branches out of my way, using my tiny phone flashlight as my only light. I started calling for Bruno and Antonio as I felt like I was close enough, according to the location he sent me at least. Suddenly I heard footsteps, so I stopped. Definitely footsteps approaching me, but they were very low and slow. I called out that they better not be trying to scare me. When they weren't answering me though, I decided this was stupid. I turned and started walking back towards the road. But those footsteps I mentioned earlier, they turned from quiet and slow to fast, and before I could even react, someone had their nails digging into my neck, effectively choking me. I heard a familiar voice screaming, "Grab him, grab him." I managed to break free from this sort of chokehold and sprinted towards the road. I know they followed me until the tree line by the road. I was faster than them, and I could run for miles. And that's what I did. I ran straight home and told my parents. They considered calling the cops, but I thought it would be better to get pictures of the nail marks on my neck and report it to the school the next day. That's what we did, and with the help of the text that I got from Bruno, I was able to get the 2 students expelled. My parents made me block both their numbers. I didn't exactly argue with that, though. My parents wanted me to confirm that these kids didn't know where we lived, and I told them simply, not as far as I know. So anyway, one night about a week later, I woke up to my room feeling really cold. I heard the sound of wind blowing into my room, and I looked at the window to see it was slid completely open. I wondered if my mom came in to open it, but that would make absolutely no sense. It was like 50 degrees out that night. I walked over to it and looked down below. A few feet below my bedroom window, there's a part of the exterior of my house that comes outward, creating a sort of ledge underneath my window that my father always told me to jump onto in case of a fire. I shut my window and walked over to my parents' bedroom. I gently knocked and opened the door, and my mom groggily asked what. I had to ask her if she opened my window. She sat up saying, "No, why?" I told her in a louder, more concerned voice now that my window was opened all the way by somebody. She started shaking my dad to wake him up and go check my room with me. But when he woke up, he told me to grow up and go back to sleep. I left my parents' door open as I walked back down the hall to my room. Then, I picked up on something that I'm surprised I picked up on. My door. It seemed to be half shut now, as opposed to completely open when I left. I pushed the door open just a little bit so I could get a look through the crack and see if, someone was behind the door. Even though I had the thought of the possibility, I never could have actually expected to see it. There was someone hiding behind my door. I screamed for my dad like a little girl. I screamed so loud I'm sure it could be heard 3 doors down. Then my door suddenly slammed shut, just as my dad came rushing out of his room over to me. I screamed there's people in my room, so he barged into the room and turned the light on. At that moment, we saw the leg of a person jumping out my window. My dad ran to the window, then downstairs and out the front door to attempt to chase them down, but he came back a few minutes later out of breath, saying he didn't see anyone. Full of energy and fear, I swore it had to be those twins that I got expelled. My dad called the police, and I had to talk to them when they arrived, explaining the whole story back to the incident in the woods. My father backed up my story, but without proof of who entered, they said there wasn't anything they could do. They merely ordered us to lock the doors and consider installing cameras outside. As positive I am that it was either one of or both of those twins in my room, after getting through a solid couple months of sleeping in fear, nothing to this nature ever happened again. Looking back now, I don't know why I was so willing to meet these kids in the woods at night. I should have realized in the cafeteria that day that they looked like trouble, and I should have stayed away. Freshman year of high school, 2007. Gym class, last period. We had a substitute gym teacher on one of the stormiest days of the year. He was an older man, not a senior citizen, but gray, maybe 55 to 60. He took attendance, and when he passed me, he did a double take at me, which I found a bit uncomfortable. Not to float my own boat, but I always understood I looked older and really good for a freshman in high school. The sub told us to get into our volleyball teams, and he disappeared into the hall by the locker rooms for a while. 40 minutes went by and the period was over. It was time for us to get changed and go home. I got into the locker room, but for some reason, my locker wasn't opening. I tried my usual combination over and over and over. It wouldn't click open though. I had to go to the sub and let him know to ask for my combination again. I figured maybe the combo just slipped from my mind for some reason. The sub told me to give him a few minutes and he'd get the list of locker combos. I waited outside the office, and out he finally came with a book in his hands, open to a specific page. He walked into the girls' locker room with me, which I didn't expect him to do. The locker room was basically empty now, with one girl finishing up changing. We walked over to my locker and tried the combination written down on the paper. It didn't work no matter how many times he tried it. Each time he tried it and failed, he would look at me and laugh. I would force myself to laugh along to be polite, but it started getting weird. He put his hand on my shoulder as he said, "We'll figure this out." He tried the combination again, with his hand still on my shoulder. When it didn't work again, I felt his hand slowly started inching down from my shoulder to my lower back. I pushed myself away and grabbed my bag, saying, "It's okay, I'm late for my bus." He tried a combo in the locker one more time, and it opened. He smiled and walked away. I waited till I heard the locker room door shut. Then I proceeded to getting changed quickly, when suddenly the room went dark. I finished pulling up my pants and shut my locker in the dark. I threw on my backpack and started walking to the back exit of the locker room, which led outside. I feared that the sub would be waiting right by the door for me. I got predatory vibes from him. When I got to the end of that specific aisle of lockers I was in the intersection of two rows. I'd have to turn down left to get to the exit door, but still. Naturally, I had to look right to make sure that it was clear. There was a little light seeping in from one single rectangular window that sat under the ceiling. It was enough. Enough for me to see him peeking at me from around the wall of lockers. So that's when I ran for the exit door. He came over behind me saying, wait, it's not what it looks like." I ran outside into the rain off the campus of the high school and walked the rest of the way home, giving me time to reflect on what happened. By the time I got home, soaking wet, it came to me that he most likely changed my locker combination somehow as a way of getting alone with me in the locker room. As for what he could have possibly been planning to do when he cut the lights, I never wanted to imagine. Honestly, I was too emotionally scared and quite frankly embarrassed to tell anyone about it, not even my parents or friends. It was something I just kept to myself all these years, because truthfully, I just don't feel comfortable telling people. When I was in high school, I was in the band. At my school, band was basically an easy A. It was either that, orchestra, or chorus, so I went with band. Anyhow, our band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, had the grading system set up so that as long as you attended class and went to your weekly lessons, you got an A. Sadly, towards the end of one quarter, I was missing 2 lessons, and because of that, my grade was a B. I went to him after class to ask if I could make up the lessons, and even though he seemed reluctant, he said he would let me come in during a lunch period and practice in one of the downstairs storage rooms to get credit for a lesson. I was more than happy with that, because realistically, I would probably just play games on my phone anyway instead of actually practicing. I arrived to the music room during my lunch period the next day, so I took my saxophone and headed down the stairs outside the music room towards the basement area for the music department. It was always kind of creepy down there because absolutely no one besides the music teachers would go down there usually, and the lights were kind of shitty. I'd only been down there a couple times before that day. But anyway, I walked down the hallway, and on either side were a bunch of doors that led into small, maybe 7 by 7 feet rooms. All of these rooms were used for storing things like chairs, music stands, spare instruments, Christmas decorations, and whatever. I stepped into one of the rooms and shut the door. I set up my music on one of the stands in the room just in case Mr. Nicholson were to come down to check on me, but really I didn't plan on actually playing. I started playing games on my phone, and then flick. Darkness. Like, as dark as it could get, minus my phone screen. I looked over to the light switch to the room just instinctively, and flicked it up and down a few times, but that did nothing. I stumbled as I got up from the seat to open the door, to more darkness. I held my phone out in front of me to light up this little hallway, even if it was just barely. I think I had like an iPhone 3 or something. Those old ones didn't have flashlights. But anyway, that little light from my phone was enough to see one of the doors open near the end of the hall, and I heard something being dragged in that room, like one of the big plastic containers. There was also manic breathing, followed by animal-like grunting. Then I saw a big plastic container being pushed out of that room into the hallway. As I saw this, I turned off my phone screen and went back into the room I was just in. I shut the door so quietly. I don't know what exactly I was thinking in that moment that I decided to hide, but I think the strange sounds I was hearing from this person, mixed with a random blackout, made me wary of staying in that hallway. Whoever that was blocking the stairs though, and of course I got no reception down in that little basement area, All I felt comfortable doing was sitting in that room and waiting for the lights to hopefully turn back on. But the lights seemed like they were never going to turn back on. So I decided I would try and get back upstairs again. I quietly opened the door with my phone in front of me for light. Then I stepped into the hall. I inched up a little closer to the stairs, then I heard something again. I quickly crept into the next closest room with the door open and shut it. I still didn't know what I was hiding from. Could it have been a staff member or janitor? At that point, the only reason I had of thinking it wasn't was because they only appeared down there after the lights turned off. I stood in that room in complete darkness, only listening and waiting for another sound from outside. But you know how when you're in a room with someone, even if you don't necessarily hear them, you can kind of just sense their presence? That's suddenly the feeling I got standing in that pitch black room. I lifted my shaking hand up and pressed the home button on my phone to turn on the screen, just for half a second. That was enough to see someone standing in the corner of this little storage room, 3 feet away from me. I pretended I didn't see anything, but it was too late. Shh, is what I heard, breaking the silence. Then, a hand patted my shoulder twice and started squeezing it. I basically dove for the doorknob, struggling to find it at first, but pulling the door open when I did. The man in the room with me tried pushing the door shut after I opened it, but I was already out. I ran up the stairs and out the door to the main level of the music hall, where the lights were still on. I ran to Mr. Nicholson to tell him, out of breath. He called security to check the basement section of the music hall, but security came back upstairs and said besides a bunch of music equipment moved around, there wasn't anyone down there. The rest of the period, Mr. Nicholson canceled his flute lesson, and I sat there in the room with him and 5 flute players, explaining the whole story in detail. Without cameras in the music hall, there was no way of catching whoever went down there and killed the power for the basement. It seemed that he was trying to steal expensive music equipment. That, or God knows what else. The next day, I was called into the dean's office to give my story of what happened, and the rest is history. One night, my friends and I hatched a genius plan. We'd sneak into the high school basement through one of the windows that was broken and never fixed. The thing about this window, you'd have to hop a short metal gate surrounding an outside staircase leading to the basement. Not that it would effectively stop anyone, but it added that extra barrier that makes you feel like you're really doing something devious when you crossed over it. We made sure there weren't any security cars anywhere nearby and hopped the gate. Crawling in through the window proved difficult, considering we had to boost ourselves up, then crawl through an insanely skinny opening. But once we were in, we were in. We kind of dispersed from each other to explore different areas. One thing was for sure, the basement of the school was a mess, and anything but interesting. There was little light. One small white light was on in a far corner, and the exit sign light actually produced more light than you'd think. I was looking around when I saw one of my friends in front of me. He whispered, "Let's go upstairs." So I followed him upstairs, and he opened the door up to the main hallway of the school. Everything was dark. I always thought there were at least some lights left on in the school at night. But no, not a single light was on. And all that really stood out as far as the eye could see were the various exit signs glowing red. I followed my friend down the hall and remembered saying, "Dude, this is really creepy." And he replied back, "Shh." But I realized he was right. Who knew if somebody else could be in the building besides my friends and I? Little did I know just yet. I followed my friend to the bathroom, and he went into one of the stalls. I whispered, "Hurry up." I waited for a while. Then my phone started to ring. I picked up, and it was one of my friends, Chris. He asked, "Where the hell did you go?" I said I'm upstairs with either Roland or Brandon. He said, "What do you mean? They're with me." And right after, both Brendan and Roland said hi, apparently on speakerphone. I stuttered the word "I" and stopped, trying to think straight. Then, there was a laughing coming from in the stall. Not the laugh of any of my friends. I looked up at the stall. There was someone looking over it at me, probably standing on the toilet. I screamed "holy shit" over and over into the phone as I left the bathroom. Shortly after I was out, I heard the stall door slam shut. I tried to run back to the basement in the dark, but it wasn't too easy to find in the dark. Luckily, I managed to find it, so I started to scream their names as I ran down the stairs. I screamed, "Go, go," when they answered, and we one by one jumped off some kind of bucket onto the window ledge and crawled back outside. I was the first one out though, afraid that person from the bathroom was following. When we were all outside, I explained to them, out of breath, while also laughing now that I felt safe with all of them next to me. I guess we were loud or something though, because as we all just started looking around at the whole school building and all the classroom windows, in one of the downstairs windows was someone with their hands pressed up on the glass. We could only see maybe half their face. I said that's gotta be him, as Roland ushered us to get the hell out of there. We ran until we were off the premises of the school, and that was that. We came up with a lot of possible explanations, but none of them really made sense. Obviously, we never did anything like that again, though. It was my first year of university. I had just finished unpacking all of my stuff into my room, and my family had just left. Later on that same day, my roommate finally arrived, and right from the get-go, I knew this kid was the most socially inept person I'd ever met. I introduced myself as Dan, staking out my arm for a handshake. He paused, looked down at my arm as if he didn't understand at first, then laughed and went, "Oh," and gave me an almost dead fish handshake. I had to ask him for his name since he didn't even tell me when we shook hands. He was Dale. I tried to make small talk, but he just answered my questions with yes or no's, occasionally awkwardly laughing or smiling. Within minutes, we were both just sitting on our beds, on our laptops, not talking to each other. I was upset and planned on requesting to be placed with a different roommate. Anyone would be better than Dale. I thought Dale was just a really awkward kid, but I soon learned he was much more than just that. I met some of the other kids on my floor and they seemed cool, so that was good. I came back to my dorm after looking around campus the first night to find Dale still in the same position he was in when I left. I said, "What's up, Dale?" and he didn't answer. Not to my surprise. It was 9:30, I didn't have anything to do, so I turned out the lamp on my side of the room and went to bed. I didn't actually fall asleep anytime soon though. Dale was on his laptop until 3 in the morning. When he finally closed his laptop, I fell asleep pretty quickly, but I woke up within the hour. The blinds to our room had been opened, and the moonlight now creeping into the room made everything visible, including Dale sitting on the side of his bed, looking at me. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and said, "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" He whispered back, "Sorry," and laid down. The next morning, I woke up to find Dale had already gotten up. I felt like it was the first time he left the room. It was a Saturday, the first Saturday of the year, meaning orientation and all the campus festivities. During the orientation, as my group was walking by the school gardens, I heard a couple of students ahead of me saying, "What is that kid doing in there?" I saw who they were talking about. It was Dale, literally sitting in the dirt behind a patch of bushes, rubbing the bark of a tree with his hand. The orientation leader didn't notice, otherwise I'm sure she would have said something. I just walked by not saying anything, eventually telling the 2 kids I overheard that he was my roommate as a way to start a conversation and maybe make some friends. They apologized for me. None of us really knew if it was appropriate to laugh or not, but we did. I made friends with those 2 kids, and we made plans to get together that night. I also learned when I got back to my dorm that the school found another roommate for me. Things seemed to be turning around quickly for the better. I left the room that night to go meet up with the 2 kids I met, and when I got back, Dale was sitting on the desk chair facing the door. I said, "Oh, hey, what's up?" He said nothing, very matter-of-factly. I sat down on my bed and opened my laptop, and realized I forgot to lock it. I also realized that all of my emails had been opened. Emails I was pretty sure I didn't even read, and a bunch of folders of mine had been opened. Dale must have snooped through my laptop. When I asked him if he did, he responded no very loudly, half a second after I even finished my question. I could read him like a book. This creepy kid was literally going through my computer when I was out. I knew he did it, but I didn't pursue it. I was ready to go to bed, so as I went into my bed to look for my pajamas, I felt like my clothing had all been moved around as well. I knew I'd be out of there forever by tomorrow, so I didn't say anything. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a zipper. I sat up and saw Dale on the ground, going through my bag. I turned the lamp on, this time confronting him about it. He played dumb, saying, "I think you have my toothbrush by mistake." It was the closest thing to wits that he'd shown up until that point. Still, I knew he was lying, and I knew something was wrong with him, so I couldn't get physical with him. The next day, I met my new roommate in the same building, and everything went well. Sunday night, after having a decent conversation with my roommate, who was no social butterfly, but was miles better than Dale, we both turned off our lights and went to bed. For the third night in a row, I woke up at some off hour of the night to a strange noise. It was a weird clicking noise. It wasn't consistent, but I'd hear it at least twice every 30 seconds. I got up, hoping to find something innocent, like a heavy bag putting pressure on a weak floorboard, or even a mouse. But as I scoped out the room, I realized the sound was actually coming from the other side of the door. The nightlight in the common area was always on, so when I looked through the peephole, I was able to see the scalp of the person standing on the other side of our door. They were looking down, so I couldn't see their face, but now that I was paying attention, I realized the tiny clicking noises were actually coming from the doorknob. I was sure the person was trying to unlock the door. I dialed the number for the campus police department, and they showed up in under 5 minutes to the common room, and only then did I feel it was safe to open the door. I found the officers to have Dale in cuffs. I had a feeling it was him. I told them everything, that he was my former roommate who was going through my stuff, so I switched dorms, only to find him trying to break into my new dorm. They took him away. I don't know what happened to him after that, but I never saw him again. He either got suspended for the semester or expelled. I got through the rest of my years at university like anybody else. However, the nightmarish experience I had with Dale still pops up in my head every now and then. I went to Binghamton University for 2 years. I quickly made a big group of friends there, and we'd go out every weekend. One weekend on a Friday night in October, when my group didn't have any big plans together, me and 2 other close friends decided to hang out in the school nature preserve by the lake. There was this little clearing on the far side of the lake that was convenient for fires. Since it was so far from view of the school or campus security, kids would sometimes, but not often, come here to smoke pot, drink, and do basically all the other drugs. It was a relatively unknown spot on campus by most, and we liked that about it. Tonight we just brought a bunch of beers, lit a fire, and hung out, having what we referred to at the time as a bro chat. As the night progressed, time seemed to pass quicker as the alcohol began to take effect. Eventually it got to the point where we were all laughing so hard that one of my 2 friends was on the floor rolling in the leaves. That was when my other friend stopped laughing and went, "Shh." We all perked up and listened, and heard the crunching of leaves and branches in the distance. We threw our bottles in the lake since we were all under 21, and it wasn't unheard of for campus police to come through the woods on weekends to catch kids doing drugs. We tucked the rest of the beers into a backpack. I was moderately drunk, so my paranoia was higher than usual. That was probably the case for all of us. The fire exposed us to anyone passing through the woods. But the thing is, this spot was so unknown and far from campus that it was rare to find anybody else that deep into the woods. It sounded like just one person in the distance. The sound of a tree branch snapping not too far away freaked all of us out. None of us were really the confrontational ones from our group, so we were lacking that one person who would have the confidence to stand up and yell out to whoever was out there. Instead, we all just sat in silence, shushing each other. We heard what seemed to be somebody or something circling us. or at least walking around in a C shape around our little campsite. It literally started to feel like we were in the movie The Blair Witch Project, because these sounds in the near distance, like cracking tree branches and leaves crunching on the ground, kept echoing over to our campsite. We laughed about it at first, but I personally soon became terrified of who or what it could be. Out of the blue, a huge thud made all three of us jump. At first I didn't understand, even though I saw what caused the sound. It took me a few seconds to digest the fact that a branch had been thrown into the center of our little fire site. One of my two friends took off running, while my other friend and I sat behind, looking at each other, half laughing, half concerned. I feel like we didn't know yet if this was some kind of joke or not. Then, my friend let out a scream of pain as he was struck in the face by another tree branch. I grabbed the backpack, helped my friend up off the floor, and we hauled ass back in the direction of our dorm. When we made it to the road separating the nature preserve from our dorm, we stopped to catch our breath. But whoever was out there proved to be following us when we heard footsteps coming closer to the road. We continued to run back to the dorm, and when we got back to our floor, we found our other friend in his room already. We looked out of his room window down to the woods. There was someone pacing back and forth by the woods, and every time a car passed, they would walk back into the woods. Eventually, whoever it was went back into the woods for good, to never be seen again by us. We continued our drinking session in the dorm room, and within 10 minutes we were all laughing about it. It wasn't until the next morning that we all realized how terrifying that experience actually was. We never really went back into the woods past dark after that. This takes place during the first week of school, my freshman year at the University of Iowa. I was just starting to get comfortable with my roommate. He was dedicated to the idea of rushing a fraternity, and rush week was starting the next week, but the parties were starting Thursday of the first week. My roommate didn't want to go alone because it would be harder to meet people that way, so he wanted me to go. I happily agreed to go with him. Even though I had no interest in rushing a fraternity, I still had intentions to go to parties. After all, I was attending a party school. My roommate wanted to go to one frat party on Thursday, and then parties at different frat houses on Friday and Saturday. On this Thursday night, we were headed to perhaps one of the lowest ranked frats. I'm pretty sure it was an underground one too. But his logic in attending was to have a backup frat in case the higher ones wouldn't give him a bid. The frat house was really far from campus, in a much more slummy downtown area. We pulled up to a corner house, and if it weren't for the blasting music and cars parked everywhere, we would never picture this house as a frat house. It literally looked like they settled with the first house they found. We knocked on the door to immediately be greeted by some short, chubby guy in a white t-shirt holding a Solo cup. His shirt had sweat stains by his armpits and mid-belly area. He told us to come right in. The party itself was in a horribly dimly lit room, with probably 50 guys bunched up into the living room. It was hot as hell in there to make it even worse. I think I saw maybe 2 girls at the entire party, neither of them even close to attractive. I gave the party a good 20 minutes, talking with one overweight foreigner after another, all giving off antisocial vibes. Eventually I waved for my roommate to get ready to leave, but a huge group of guys by the door made us decide to wait a little longer to avoid the awkwardness of leaving early. I continued to drink the cheap beers they were serving. I think I downed 5 cups before I could even feel a buzz. A heavy guy approached me with a tiny bottle in his hand and handed it to me, smirking and saying, "That'll get you shit-faced." I fake laughed and thanked him, expecting him to go away, but he just watched me as if he were waiting for me to drink it. So, I did. It was maybe 2 shots worth of some kind of hard liquor. The guy then started making conversation with me, and every time I hinted that I was trying to get away, he would try to pull me further into this otherwise one-sided conversation. Things started to get really blurry pretty soon. I remember feeling dizzy all of a sudden, and the room seemed to be getting darker. That was the last thing I remember before waking up in a dark room, laying in a bed. I could hear the sound of music muffled behind closed doors, so I knew I was still in the frat house. It was a very dark room, however I could still make out certain furniture in the room, and a small closet door, not much else though. But even over the blaring music, I heard the sound of a plastic bag being crunched from the closet, as if somebody had stepped on it by mistake. I ran out of that room and down the stairs back to the overcrowded living room. I found my roommate and pushed him out the front door, past the group of guys still standing in a circle right next to it. During the car ride back to campus, I told my roommate I was drugged. He almost called the cops, but I said it would be foolish and pointless. My roommate then asked me an awkward question. Was I taken advantage of? I didn't feel any type of pain, and my clothes were all still on the same, so I assumed not. When I did a time check, I realized I'd only been out for maybe 10 minutes before waking up. Whatever the guy gave me must have been a dud or something, thank God. That was my college experience of attending an underground ghetto frat party, and it remains to be my scariest life experience. I had a single dorm my first semester of sophomore year. It was in the corner of the floor, kind of secluded from the rest of the dorm rooms, since it was in its own little section. You had to turn a corner to even see the door. It was nice because I'd be able to still talk with friends on my floor, invite people over to my room, and still have privacy when it was time to do homework or go to sleep. A few weeks into the semester, while studying for a bio exam, the silence was interrupted by a noise. It took me a bit to realize it was a light tapping on the door. It was so light that I almost didn't even hear it. I yelled, "Come in," but the door didn't open, so I got up to open it. Nobody was there. I walked around the corner to look down the hall. Nobody. Somebody was obviously messing with me. I went back to my bed and continued studying, this time leaving the door open. Nobody came back. The next night, a few minutes after shutting the lamp in my bedroom to go to bed, the tapping on the door returned, only this time it was much louder, more of a knocking sound. I called out, "Who is it?" and again the knocking stopped and nobody answered. I got out of my bed quickly and opened the door to see my small private corridor was void of any people. Again, I ran the 10 feet from my door to the corner to look down the main hallway of the floor. Nobody. The next morning, I asked some of the other kids in the dorm if they had been messing with me. Everyone said no. The next night, I woke up after having been asleep for 3 hours. Someone was knocking on my door again, this time louder than ever. I had trouble deciding whether to open the door or not this time. With a bout of courage, I hopped up and opened the door. Nobody was there as I was expecting, but this time I full-on sprinted down the tiny corridor isolating my room, and when I turned the corner, I saw the back of somebody disappearing behind the far corner on the opposite side of the hallway. I ran as fast as I could down the hallway, and as I turned to the next hallway where I saw the person a few seconds earlier, I saw a door at the end of the hallway shutting. It wasn't a dorm room, it was a bathroom. I felt like I was ready to confront whoever this joker was, so I pushed open the bathroom door with force. The light was off. I turned it on expecting to see somebody hiding in there, but I didn't see anyone. My first instinct was to check the 2 bathroom stalls, which were both shut. I got on my hands and knees and looked under the 2 stalls. 2 heavy black boots could be seen from underneath one of the stall doors. I took a deep breath and pushed the stall open. I was confused. There were the boots sitting on the floor, but no person to wear them. And then I heard a creepy giggling noise. Not a feminine or childlike one. It was a kind of laughing that I could only imagine to be that of a really old crazy man. For some reason my confidence was gone and I was scared shitless. Therefore I ran back to my room and shut the door. I hopped back in my bed and started texting every friend I had. Of course everybody was asleep though. The knocking happened one more time that night. I ignored it. It went on for about 30 seconds before whoever that person was finally gave up. I spoke to everybody on my floor the next day. Nobody else heard any knocking, and everybody swore they weren't pranking me. Everybody seemed sincere. I don't know why this person chose to harass me, or who this person was. Judging by the boots and the laughing I heard, this was an older man though, and that disturbs me.
Immediately go to the nearest room and lock and barricade the door. Stay low and stay quiet.
I went to a somewhat typical high school. Not in a traditional American suburb, but a more rural set high school. Some kids go to schools with graduating classes of like 500 to hell, even 1,000 kids. My high school had, I think, a little less than 200 kids in my graduating class. It was the kind of high school where even if you weren't friends with someone, you still knew them by face and name. Walking down the hallways, you'd know basically 99% of your peers, at least in your own graduating class. Coming from a quiet town, there weren't a lot of crazy news stories, really. It was pretty uneventful there. What we did for fun after school was actually go out and play sports and ride our bikes around and stuff like that. This was like 17 years ago though, so I guess things may be a lot different these days for kids. Another thing I always felt that was unique about our school was that there didn't really seem to be any bullying for the most part. Like, at least not the typical cliche movie-style bullying, where kids are getting pushed into lockers or having their lunch money stolen. When I think back now, I can't really name a single kid from my graduating class who could be labeled as a bully. Sure, there were kids who just tease others, but nothing too serious. Of course, there were quiet kids in our grade, like every school has, but there was one kid in my grade who literally never spoke at all. I'm gonna just name him Luke for this story. He wasn't even a weird-looking kid or anything. He seemed pretty nice to people who went out of their way to interact with him. I shared one class with him, though. It was an elective that had kids from all 4 grades in it. Luke and I were juniors when this happened. This elective was a computer class, and back when this happened, the computer rooms in our high school were still rocking those big, bulky box computers. I remember the layout of this classroom. There was the aisle in the middle separating 2 columns of tables, and the 2 columns had 4 rows each. Each row had 4 seats, and each student had their own computer. This class wasn't full, so there were probably like 26 filled seats out of 32. Luke always sat in the second row in the furthest seat to the left with no one next to him, as everyone else sat with people they knew from their respective grades. Unfortunately, not long into the semester, the seniors in the class started collectively picking on Luke. By this, I mean some of the seniors would make jokes about how quiet Luke was, that it was scary when the teacher would ask certain things. For whatever reason, our teacher never stood up for Luke and told them to cut it out. The teacher was a bit of a pushover from what I remember. Maybe that was why. As the semester went on, it got a little worse. I remember at one point seeing a small piece of paper fly from the back row from the seniors right to the back of Luke's head. I remember he turned around and had this very telling look. The seniors continued to make fun, one of them saying, "Wasn't me," and blaming one of the other seniors. The look on Luke's face just looked like a mix of sadness, anger, and just defeatedness. I genuinely felt bad, but I didn't get involved. Eventually, one day I saw Luke sitting on a curb not far from the high school after school ended one day. I passed by him as I was walking to my car. I have an early birthday, so I was driving around halfway through junior year. Given we were in a quiet area, no one was exactly walking distance from school. So I did the right thing and said, "What's up?" and asked if he needed a ride home. His face literally lit up a bit as he said yes. We walked to my car, and from there on, he guided me to his house. It was about a 10-minute drive to his house. We talked a lot during that car ride. I told him he should just ignore the seniors in our computer class. I said they're a bunch of deadbeats anyway. He said they're not the only ones that he's sick of. He implied that he deals with people picking on him in multiple classes, which honestly made me feel pretty terrible for him. In those 10 minutes, I felt like I learned a lot about Luke and got to know him as a person just a bit, and he seemed like a decent kid. As I dropped him off, I made a comment to him about how close we lived, and then we said goodbye. Every day in class after that, we'd say hey to each other, but admittedly, I unfortunately never got involved whenever he got picked on. Well, one day, Luke didn't show up to class. Computer class was 4th period. It wasn't until 7th period English that an announcement came over the loudspeaker saying, "Lockdown, this is not a drill." I remember everyone looking around nervously, and I remember our teacher looking the most nervous. She ran to turn off the lights and told everyone to hurry to one corner of the room. Seeing how nervous our teacher was only made all the students even more nervous. We sat with the lights off for a long time. It had to be 20 to 30 minutes until there was another message on the loudspeaker. It was the principal, explaining that there was someone in a mask carrying a black duffel bag trying to get into the school. Our school had really good security, and when someone spotted that person approaching the school with what could only be assumed to be guns or any kind of weapons in that duffel bag, the doors were all locked. The school day was cut short after that once a few police cars were on the scene. I remember it being a Friday, so I took a few of my friends home to my house so we could hang out. I'd be lying if I said I remember the small details thereafter of that day, but I think it was that same night that I woke up in the middle of the night to light tapping at my window. And I could see someone on the other side of the glass. I started freaking out, and before running to get my dad, I took a closer look and then said, "Who is it?" I heard Luke's voice as he said his name. I felt like my heart dropped a second time. I went over to the window and lifted it just a crack. I said, "What are you doing? How did you find me?" And he said through the window, "I tried to do something bad." And it instantly clicked. I mean it. It instantly clicked in my head that it was him. Before he could even tell me, I said, "Was it you who caused the lockdown?" And he said yes. I was scared to ask him what he was planning on doing. Instead, I asked him how he found me. He admitted to remembering the deli that I said I lived by, and he eventually found my car after biking around the area. That explanation didn't make it any less disturbing. Luke asked me if he could come in and talk about what he planned on doing, and I said no, I cannot let him in, nor can I hear what he planned on doing. I actually recommended he go to the school and confess to whatever he was going to do, and when he refused to walk away from my window, I said "Dad" really loudly, which worked in scaring him off. I went to my parents' room and woke them up to tell them. My mom was the one who insisted on calling the police. She was distraught. When a police officer eventually came, I had no choice but to tell the truth. I gave Luke's identity, and I explained that he had just come to my window admitting to potentially almost doing something horrible at the school. Obviously, the police were already aware of the lockdown, so I believe police were sent to his house that night, but after speaking with Luke's parents, they realized Luke wasn't there. I believe it was the next day that Luke was either found or he just returned home and police were still waiting there, and he confessed to what he told me. As far as our graduating class knew, Luke was charged with something like making a terroristic threat. I know he did time, and I know he's been out a long time. To be honest, I don't really know if he's still around. Part of me always wanted to feel bad for Luke, witnessing how loneliness and getting picked on can probably eat away at someone. He followed me and came to me simply because I showed him an act of kindness, something I unfortunately believe nobody else showed him. Still, the fact that he admitted to bringing a gun to school with a mask on, even if he didn't admit to intending on carrying out the implied threat, I can't fully believe he simply came to the school with a gun just to scare people. I think he for a split second had a horrible plan and got cold feet and regretted it. I just hope Luke eventually got the help he needed. This happened in 2016, back when I was in 5th grade. If you remember that year, you probably remember all the killer clown sightings that were happening around the country. At the time, it was all over the news and social media. Most adults thought it was just some dumb trend or prank, but for young kids, it was actually pretty scary. It was a normal day at school. I went to an elementary school in a quiet suburban area where I still live. Nothing weird ever really happens here. It was around 1 p.m. I'm guessing, because it was closer to the end of the school day. We were in class working on some random assignment, and the classroom was quiet except for a few people whispering. Then, one of the students in my class suddenly said out loud, "There's a clown outside." I still remember her high-pitched voice as she said it. Some of us stood up and looked toward the window, and yeah, there really was a clown outside. He was standing just a few feet away from the window, facing our classroom directly. He was wearing a baggy, dirty red and yellow clown suit and had white face paint with black around the eyes. He was smiling and staring in at us with this big fake grin. After a few seconds, he started waving slowly. Some of the kids thought it was funny and laughed. Others were clearly freaked out. Our teacher, Mrs. Riker, walked over to the window, looked at the guy for a second, and then said through the glass, loud and annoyed, "Excuse me, classes are in session, you need to get out of here." The clown didn't react at all. He just kept standing there, smiling and waving. Mrs. Riker told us all to sit back down and said she was calling the front office. She picked up the corded classroom phone and then walked into the hallway with it and spoke quietly. The phones in the classrooms were always next to the door, so that's how she was able to walk outside the room with it. She came back in moments later and then hung up. She walked over to the window and shut all the blinds after she saw that the man in the clown costume was still there, doing the same creepy waving motion, smiling, and general clownish mannerisms. Not even 2 minutes later, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Staff, please get your classrooms into lockdown formation." There was a sense of urgency in the voice that, looking back, was probably to alert the teachers that it wasn't a drill without causing all the kids to go into a panic. That's when it got serious. Mrs. Riker rushed to turn off the lights and told us all to get under our desks. She pulled the door shut and locked it. Everyone was quiet. Some kids were giggling, but others looked scared. I was definitely scared. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, but it was actually about 30 minutes. Nobody knew what was happening, but eventually, the principal came back on the loudspeaker and said the lockdown was over and that the situation had been handled. Apparently, school security had confirmed that the clown was gone. They didn't tell us anything else. Classes went on like normal for the rest of the day. It felt weird. Everyone was talking about it during dismissal, but the teachers didn't say much. Then, after school, I was walking home with my friend Chris. We lived in the same neighborhood, just a few blocks away. While we were walking, a couple of 5th grade girls behind us suddenly ran past us, looking panicked. One of them said, "There's someone in the woods." We stopped and turned around. Behind the school, there's a small patch of trees. It's not deep woods or anything, just enough to separate the school from the street behind it. And standing just barely out of view, near the edge of the woods, was the clown again. Same dirty outfit, same painted face. He was half hidden by the trees, but he was clearly waving, and he wasn't just waving at random. He was doing it slowly, directly at the girls who had just passed us, like he was trying to call them over. Chris and I didn't say anything. We just ran. I don't know what happened after that, but I told my parents as soon as I got home. They called the school, and later I heard from another kid that the police were called again and patrolled the area, but they never found anyone. To this day, nobody knows who that guy was, and I don't know if he was just trying to scare some kids or if he were planning something worse. But what freaks me out the most is that he came back after the lockdown, and he waited, hidden in the trees, watching kids go home. So this happened not long ago. I live on the outskirts of Philadelphia, where it's me, my son, and my stepdaughter. I say stepdaughter as I've taken my best friend's daughter in legally. Around 2016, my best friend Joanne was murdered by her husband. He ended up making national headlines and was convicted of 5 more murder cases. He's facing 3 consecutive life sentences with no parole. Now I'm a middle school teacher at my son's school. He's the year below what I teach. My stepdaughter is the grade above what I teach, so their classrooms are not far off from mine. This incident took place on March 30th, 2020, when the lockdowns were slowly taking place. Where I taught, the school was rather distant from anywhere. The next school was about 10 miles, the gas station was about 2 miles, and the nearest park was about 600 meters from where we were. So we were one of the last schools to go into lockdown. Around midday of March, it was a normal heated Monday. I was teaching math at that time for the 6th graders. All of a sudden, I get a notification on my phone that someone was here to pick up my stepdaughter. The system that works is the main emergency number gets a notification if someone is picking up your child. The thing is, my stepdaughter was 3 classes down from me. She had no appointments, no close family that lived in a good radius from us. I replied that I'm here at school and no one in a 10-mile radius is picking her up. This was sending alarm bells off left and right. They said that the person picking her up was her biological dad. The school doesn't have that type of information on file. A few minutes go by on the phone and it's dead silent. The lady tells me she's going to call the principal and see what he wants to do from there. A gut feeling didn't sit right with me. I called my stepdaughter's classroom and asked for her to be sent to my room. Just as I hung up, I was back to teaching when my stepdaughter came into the classroom. Not even 10 minutes later, the lockdown siren went off. I had kids push desks to the door and barricade the windows, and everyone sat in the corner. I had a pretty good feeling on who this lockdown was about. We were in a lockdown for about 46 minutes at this point. My main concern was how did he end up getting out? About 2 hours later, the lockdown was lifted and I was escorted out by the police. I was further questioned on how I knew this man due to the CPS records. I said I took my best friend's daughter in and explained the whole story. The police informed me that how he had gotten out was a prison bus transporting inmates to another cell, but a car came swerving in and crashed into the prison bus, leaving 10 prisoners dead on the scene, 2 prison guards knocked out, and 20 escaped. There were police already at our house waiting for the dad to show up, but he never did. When they heard the lockdown at the school, they knew it was one of the prisoners. If they had never gotten there on time, I honestly have no idea what would have happened. This happened during my freshman year of high school. I'm 21 now, and I still think about it all the time. I went to a public school in a pretty average suburban town. We did lockdown drills maybe once every couple months, so when this one started, that's exactly what I thought it was, just a drill. It was a Wednesday, 4th period. I remember because it was earth science and we had just finished a pop quiz. I was putting my stuff into my backpack when the loudspeaker came on and said, "This is a lockdown. Lock all doors, lights off, stay quiet." At first, nobody panicked. Our teacher, Mrs. Chen, sighed, got up, and locked the door like usual. She turned off the lights and told us all to get into the corner of the room, away from the door. Everyone was laughing a little and whispering like it was no big deal. But then we heard a second announcement. Same voice, but it sounded different, more rushed. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." That's when the room went silent. My teacher didn't say a word. She just motioned for everyone to stay down and keep quiet. I could tell even she was nervous now. She kept checking her phone, and we could hear faint, distant police sirens outside. A few minutes passed, then we heard something from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow ones, and not in a hurry like a cop or a teacher, just one person walking. They stopped right in front of our classroom. We were all staring at the door. Nobody breathed. Then came a knock. Not loud, just a soft, slow knock, 3 times. Nobody moved. Then the doorknob turned. They tried to open it, but it was locked, obviously, but they kept trying. Not aggressively, just turning the handle back and forth like they were checking. And then, a male's voice on the other side said, "This is just a drill, you can open the door now." We all collectively looked at Mrs. Chen, and then she looked back at all of us, put her finger up to her lips, and shook her head no. The person on the other side of the door kept knocking and trying the doorknob, and eventually the knocks got more aggressive as the voice of the man on the other side kept saying hello. Our classroom was on the first floor in the science wing. I can't tell you how much I was shaking in my shoes. I know even if all the other kids didn't want to admit it, they were as well. Eventually the knock stopped, and the man must have walked away. We heard nothing after that for a solid 5 minutes. Total silence, apart from the police sirens outside getting louder. It felt like forever. Then, someone down the hall screamed. It was a girl. Just one scream and then nothing. A couple of people in my class started crying quietly. Honestly, it was the girls. Someone whispered that they saw a shadow move past the little glass window on the classroom door on several occasions. Each time anyone spoke, even quietly, Mrs. Chen gave a stern but quiet shh. Another 5 or 10 minutes passed. Then, finally, we heard the sound of police officers shouting from down the hallway, telling everyone to stay in place. They were going room to room, and when they finally knocked on our door and unlocked it with a key, Mrs. Chen didn't even move until they showed their badges. We were all escorted out in a line, past other classes doing the same thing. There were cop cars everywhere outside, even a SWAT van. I didn't see anything too crazy, but I did see one officer leading a guy in cuffs out of the building. He looked about 30. Not a student, pale, long hair, wearing dark clothes. Later that day, we found out that some criminal had slipped into the school through one of the side doors during a delivery. That side door was right by the end of the science wing. Apparently, he was mentally unstable and had something in his backpack, but I don't know if it was a weapon or not. They didn't tell us much. They just said nobody was hurt and everything was under control. But I swear, I'll never forget that knock at the door. The way he turned the handle, the scream down the hall. It didn't feel like everything was under control at all. I had just started school, and I already had a lockdown to tell. I'm only 15 years old and just started as a sophomore at Northside High School in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That morning, I came to school early, around 6:55 a.m. I was one of the first people in my first period class, which was chorus. Our classroom is at the very end of the fine arts hallway, right next to the auditorium. I was sitting at my seat with my phone out, listening to music and just waiting for the bell to ring and start the day. After a few minutes, I heard my teacher say something, so I paused my music and took out my headphones. When I looked up, I saw my classmates heading into the closet at the back of the choir room. I was confused. We had just practiced a lockdown drill the day before, so I wasn't sure if this was another drill or something else. Still, I listened to what the teacher was saying and followed everyone else into the closet. The teacher shut the door behind us and turned off the lights. We were now sitting in complete darkness, with only a small amount of light coming in from under the door. At this point, I still didn't know what was happening, but then I heard police sirens outside. That's when I started to realize this wasn't a drill, it was real. I started to feel nervous, but I kept calm. I figured if I stayed as composed as I could, maybe I wouldn't panic as much. I sat in that closet quietly, trying to listen for any sounds coming from outside, but I didn't hear anything else. We stayed in that closet with the lights off until the lockdown ended around 8:45 a.m. That's nearly 2 hours. Once we were let out, I felt calm again because everyone around me had stayed calm too. I went back to my seat in the front of the room and put my music back on, just trying to get back to normal. Later on, I decided to ask my teacher what had happened. I said, "Were there any fights today?" The teacher looked at me seriously and said, "It's much worse." That's when I started to realize something serious had really gone down. I looked out the window and saw cars lined up in the back of the school. At first, I thought it was just regular pickup traffic, but it felt different. In the classroom, some students were trying to get information. Eventually, my friend Jacob told me that someone had been stabbed in the middle of the school, in the rotunda. I didn't know much more than that at the time, but shortly after, my mom texted me asking if I was okay. I told her I was safe and still in my choir class. Some girls in the class had started crying after the lockdown, and that made everything feel even more real. My mom called me next. She told me she had parked her car at the baseball field, along with a bunch of other worried parents trying to find their kids. Eventually, my name was called and I was allowed to leave the school. When I got to the field, I found my mom. She was clearly shaken up, and honestly, so was I. She drove me to the daycare where she worked, and once we got there, both of us went into a quiet room where we cried together. Her co-workers came in to try and comfort us, and I had to go outside to calm down even more. I put my headphones back in and listened to 3 Days Grace just to get my head right again. Later on, we found out exactly what happened. 2 students had been taken to the hospital. One of them died. A teacher had also been slashed by the attacker. In total, 3 people had been hurt that day. I started searching for more information and found the press conference about the incident already posted online. After watching it, my mom took me to Arby's to get something to eat. I hadn't eaten all day. We got our food, then we went to pick up my younger brother from his middle school. He told us he had noticed a lot of cops at the school, but didn't know what had happened. When we got home, I kept searching online for updates. That's when I saw that a 16-year-old had already been charged with voluntary manslaughter, assault with a deadly weapon, and a list of other serious charges. 2 more students, one 15 and one 16, were also charged with assault and disorderly conduct. What made it even more disturbing was that someone had recorded the stabbing and posted the video on Snapchat. I didn't watch the video myself, but my mom told me about it. She said in the video, the person recording was running, so the phone was pointed at the ground, but you could clearly hear the screams of kids as the stabbing happened. My mom thinks the whole thing might have been gang-related, and after I heard that, I was scared. Scared that someone might come back to retaliate. Another attack, more violence. It's hard to believe that someone actually died. I didn't even know the kid, but I've been thinking about him ever since. I hope he rests in peace.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert.
Before being taken on as a full-time teacher at a high school a little outside of Austin, Texas, I was a substitute. I would sub in for a multitude of classes, with my main subject area being math classes. Being a sub, I would most days have a lot more off periods, of course, since I would work more on an as-needed basis. This was on a day that started like any other. I had 4 classes I would be subbing for that day. They were all the math classes that a specific teacher would teach, including geometry and algebra. I would usually enjoy subbing for science classes, as the teachers would usually just have me show the class an educational documentary and then hand out a question sheet, which would be handed in at the end of the class to be graded. With math though, you'd actually have to teach the material as a sub. I arrived to school and picked up the keys from the front office to the 2 classrooms I'd be subbing in that day. Both classes were in the math hallway, which was downstairs to the far left of the school. The periods I was teaching that day were something like 2, 3, 7, and 9. I had already taught the first 2 classes, so I had about an hour and a half before the 7th period class I'd be teaching. During most of this time, I stayed in the classroom of the last class I just subbed for since it was empty for the next 2 periods. I was doing a mix of work-related and non-work-related things on my laptop. Period 6 there would be another class here, so I'd migrate to the teacher's lounge by the back of the school. After the 2nd bell rang and period 6 began, I was walking the empty halls to the teacher's lounge. I'd been in the lounge multiple times, and honestly, it would usually be subs sitting in there, if anyone. The teacher's lounge is pretty much in the back corner of the school, by a separate back entrance that's only unlocked from the outside by teachers' ID cards. I set my belongings down on a table in the empty teacher's lounge, and this was when I heard knocks at the back exit door. I went out to the hall and to the doors, where I saw a clean-cut looking man with gray short hair and a button-down shirt tucked into khakis, with a black jacket over all of it. He looked like a teacher. He saw me through the glass and smiled and asked me to open the door. I asked if he were a teacher here. He said, "Yes, my name's Mr. Abrams. I don't have my ID on me today." I opened the door for him, and he thanked me and quickly walked past me. I noticed that now he had his hand in his right pocket. He had some serious movement in his step. He seemed to know where he was going. Actually, he was going in the direction of the math hallway. I suddenly felt like I may have made a mistake letting him in without ID. I rushed to my laptop and pulled up the staff directory, which was accessible to all employees of the school. I looked up Mr. Abrams. There was not a single teacher at any of the schools, elementary to high school, with the last name Abrams. I had no choice but to call the front office and let them know that I think someone pretending to be a teacher had entered the building. This was taken seriously as the school issued a lockdown immediately, sending every classroom an automatic distress call to lock all doors and turn off all lights immediately. I heard a commotion from out in the math hallway. I walked out into the hall, a little closer, and I could hear bangs or kicks on a door, and a man screaming at the top of his lungs, "Maria, open up, and I know you're in there." Maria was the first name of the teacher I was subbing for that day, and I couldn't tell for sure, but I believe the door he was kicking on was one of the classrooms I subbed in that day. Police had surrounded the school in literally minutes, and had entered from multiple entrances and detained the man. I didn't witness it happen. It was down in the intersecting hallway, and I wasn't allowed past the police. The teacher I subbed for, who I changed the name for her privacy, had called out of work that week, originally alleging she was very sick. The man who came to the school banging on the door was apparently her ex-husband, and as far as rumor has it, Maria did something horrible to him. Not much of a rumor, because clearly that would be the case if he came to the school with a gun. Everyone's guess is he came to kill her and then himself. No one knew where Maria went to hide from her ex, or what the full story was, but she didn't return to work for months. I pray to God all the time thanking him that no one was hurt or killed, because I was the one to let him in, and that would have forever sat on my conscience. This story is told in the perspective of a college-aged female. I attend university in Massachusetts. I currently live off campus in my final year here, but this took place when I was a freshman living in the dorms. Freshmen are on the first floor of every building on campus. This was the winter semester. It was a freezing cold day. I just finished up my last class around 5 p.m. Our professor let us out really early. It was already dark out as I was walking back to my dorm. On my walk back, I got a text from the university. The text started in all capitals saying, "Attention all faculty and staff, get to a safe building immediately," as a suspicious man was walking around campus approaching women with crude, threatening comments and telling them he had a gun. The text mentioned that university police were aware of the issue and were on full alert, looking to find the man. I picked up the pace in my step to get back to my dorm building. I started looking behind me every few seconds, and suddenly noticed someone walking not that far behind me. It was a black man in a huge winter coat. I couldn't gauge his age from this distance. But also, he could have just been a student. At that point, I was being paranoid. Plus, the text didn't specify the person's race. I rushed to my building, and when I got there, I let myself in. To get into any dorm buildings on campus, you need to use your student ID cards. I entered the building. The first door shut, then I opened the second door. That's when a loud bang at the first door made me jump. It was that man from behind me before. He was asking if I could open the door. I was about to ignore him, but then he said, "Please, I'm cold." I turned to look at him, and he had this pleading kind of expression on his face. I asked, "Do you live here? What's your room number?" He said yes, he's on the 3rd floor, but he ignored my asking his room number twice. I said, "Sorry, I can't let you in." This is when he started saying vulgar, horrible shit that I don't want to repeat. He started licking the glass and commenting about what he's gonna do to me as soon as he gets into the building. In disgust, I ran to my room and slammed the door behind me. I turned on the lights as it was pitch black inside and my roommate wasn't back yet. I texted my dorm group chat saying I think the creepy man the school sent a warning about was at the front door of the dorm building. Don't come anywhere near. Everyone replied the same thing. OMG, call university police. That's what I did. I got the number off the website and called them. Told them right away the creepy man with a gun was at our dorm building. When they asked if he was still there, naturally I walked to the window to look outside. I screamed at the top of my lungs for 3 seconds when I saw the man on the other side of the glass, smiling, shaking his head, doing this disgusting motion with his tongue. I pleaded with the officer on the line to send the police there now. The man on the other side of the glass took off running, and he disappeared into the darkness as soon as he was beyond the light of the light posts. I still cried for the police to hurry, and as soon as one of them got to my dorm room, I let him in and described what the man looked like. He told me to stay in my room and don't leave again for the night. He advised I tell all my friends in the building to do the same. An additional text was sent out to all residents of my building. The hunt for that man went all night apparently. They never found him. The things he said to me were beyond disturbing. I didn't see a gun on him, but honestly anything could have been in his massive coat pockets. The campus had extra police on duty the rest of the week. When I was in 2nd grade, each day of the week we'd have a different extracurricular activity at some point in the day. I think it went Mondays was art class, Tuesdays was music class, Wednesday was library day, and so on. By 2nd grade, kids were allowed to walk to the bathroom unattended as long as they got permission and took the special hall pass item chosen by the teacher of the class. For the art class, it was this big green plastic crayon that was meant as the bathroom pass. I remember this memory almost vividly, which makes it all the more disturbing when I think about it. Honestly, I was kind of a weird kid when I was in elementary school. I did have some social issues that I don't think ever got diagnosed, but I would sometimes just do weird things. Case in point, we were never supposed to just take the bathroom pass and leave the classroom without asking first. But during art class, as our teacher was going around the class helping the students out with our little creations, I got up and took the plastic crayon and walked out the classroom door to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was all the way down the hall. I go inside, and as a kid, I was the type to pee sitting down. So I went to the stall and sat on the toilet seat. This was when I heard the loudspeaker outside the bathroom, that the school was going into lockdown. My heart started to race. I was outside of the classroom during a lockdown. I was terrified. I don't remember if I finished peeing or not, but I know I got right off the toilet seat and went outside back into the hall. I was scared I was going to get in trouble. I saw all of the classroom doors were shut with their blinds down and lights off already. I was too late. I saw a man walking down the hallway. I assumed it was a teacher, even though he wasn't dressed like one. I had the wits of a 2nd grader, so I said, "Excuse me, I'm locked out of my classroom." I remember vividly, he said back, "Oh, that's alright, come with me, I know where to go." He grabbed my hand and we started walking in what seemed to be the direction of the back exit. That's when I heard a familiar woman's voice keep screaming Troy, my name, from behind us. It was my art teacher, Miss Green. She screamed at the man to get off me and grabbed me by the arm and tugged at me back to the art classroom. Once inside, she locked the door and scolded me quietly. I remember seeing the worry in her eyes. She might have even been crying. The lockdown continued for another half hour at least. The whole time I was confused, scared, and most of all embarrassed by all the stares my classmates were giving me. The principal came on the loudspeaker eventually and said the lockdown was over. When my art teacher got on the phone with, I assume, the front office, I think whatever she said was what prompted the faculty to end the school day early. I'm so grateful for Miss Green. She really put herself in danger and saved me from something horrible, whether it be from kidnapping to any amount of emotional trauma. This happened to me when I was a junior in high school, around April or May of 2019. I live on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but for privacy reasons, I'll leave out the school name. I played the double bass in our school wind ensemble, and every morning we had rehearsal in the band hall. We were about halfway through rehearsal when I heard a knock on the band hall door, which opened to the outside. I don't think anyone else heard the knock because we were in the middle of performing a song, and I was standing with my double bass on the perimeter of the ensemble, along with the percussionists, so I was closer to the door. Before anyone could say anything or react, one of the percussionists who I knew just blindly went over to the door and opened it for the person outside. We had been repeatedly told by the band directors to never open that door for anyone on the outside unless it was a student, and even the students had to show their student ID badges through the window before being let in, but we still have to open that door a lot for other students as it locks on its own. So he probably just opened it without thinking and didn't look through the window. As soon as he opened the door, the person forcefully came in and walked to within 15 to 20 feet from where I was standing. It was a middle-aged Latino man, about 5'6", wearing a gray hoodie and cargo shorts. I immediately noticed that the guy had both of his hands in his hoodie, with what appeared to be a heavy object. The band director saw him first and immediately stopped conducting, and the rest of the band turned their heads around to see what was going on. The band director asked with a nervous but forceful tone, "Can I help you?" The man replied in broken English, "Yes, I came to check out my daughter." The band director asserted, "This is not where you check out students, you shouldn't be here." The man then asked where he should go to check out his daughter, and to my surprise, the band director directed him to go out the band hall double doors and make a right down the school's main hallway to the front office. The man thanked the director and quickly walked out of the band hall into the school. During this whole conversation, I had my double bass turned in the man's direction and stood behind it so that it would maybe somewhat shield me from any bullets. After the man had disappeared down the hallway, the entire orchestra was speechless for a minute or so, processing what just happened. The director immediately called the school security, and within a minute or so, the school was on lockdown. The director turned off all the lights in the band hall, and we all crammed inside whatever tuba lockers we could find. A whole 5 minutes passed until 2 armed security guards came running full speed through the band hall in the direction that the man had gone. Another 10 or so minutes passed and the lockdown was over. The school never came out with an official statement of the event, nor could I even find any local news articles about it. I suppose the school was trying to keep the whole thing a secret, for such a stupid breach of security would certainly damage its reputation. But I later heard from multiple other students that the man had just committed an armed robbery somewhere near the school and was fleeing on foot from the police when he decided to take refuge in the school, pretending to pick up his daughter. I also heard that he was found with a gun on him, which explains the heavy object I noticed in his hoodie pocket. The fact that I was standing literally 15 or so feet from an armed intruder inside of a school for a whole 2 minutes still terrifies me to this day. Although I know the band director was probably trying to keep his cool so as not to piss the guy off and cause him to shoot all of us or something, I still think he made a huge mistake by directing the man to go further into the school, instead of telling him to go back outside and enter the school through the front door like every other parent or visitor has to. Had that man had worse intentions, that situation could have ended tragically. I'm glad I'm not in high school anymore, because now I know firsthand how easily such things could happen at the hands of a careless mistake. This experience was short and to the point. I was a very young child in Catholic private school. I was in the 4th grade. Our school would routinely practice lockdown drills. I think once every couple of weeks we'd have one. All of us in the class were always excited for them. For some reason as kids we just found it to be fun. It's all a joke when you're that young. Half the kids don't even realize what you're practicing for, and the other half who do don't ever expect a real lockdown to happen. One day it did, though. Over the intercom came a voice from the front office saying, "We're going into lockdown, this is not a drill." I remember some kids still laughed at the announcement, as if it were cool to hear that we're going into lockdown. No one could have prepared for what came next. As our teacher seemed concerned and rushed to shut the door on the lights and yelled at us to get in the corner, I think that's when everyone realized this wasn't just a regular lockdown drill. Something serious was going on. We all huddled in the corner of the room. Each door had a narrow glass window which could be looked through. Suddenly the silence was broken by crazed screaming from the halls. It was one lone male's voice. It was just incoherent screaming. The man was chanting something. The screams got closer, and I remember how scared we all started to get. The screams got closer until they were right outside our classroom door, and then bangs on the door made a bunch of us scream and cry. The man on the other side of the door screamed, "Your God is dead. Jesus didn't die for your sins. You're all gonna burn." Our teacher tried his best to calm us down as the screams intensified, and the man started to yell, "I hear you in there. I see you. Open up the door." The man screamed words I didn't understand at the time, but I believe looking back, he was screaming Islamic phrases and shaming our religion. I was too young to put it all together immediately. The bangs on our door stopped, and the screams continued further down the hall away from the door, but they could still be heard. The crazed man continued through the halls. The man's screams were overpowered eventually by the yells of other men. There was a huge commotion in the halls during what I presume to be the moment he was taken down by police or security. We had to stay in the lockdown position for a long time even after this. After a while, the lockdown was over, and the school day was cut short. Parents were called to pick up their children. Luckily, my mom didn't work, so she was able to come pick me up right away. It was a bit of a scarring experience. We were all so young that we didn't even understand the gravity and freakishness of the situation. I'm just glad no one got hurt.